It's been a while since I've done the full setup with the camera and the audio and everything. Roses are red, my love. Violets are blue. Sugar is sweet, my love, but not as sweet as you. I don't even like that song. Hey everybody, it's Willie the Composer here, and I have always considered myself something of an English language chauvinist, if you will. Just somebody who has pride in the English language. I am partially English in ancestry, and I am an American. So I always like the English language the most. I think you can say anything in the English language. I think any idea, thought, or concept, no matter how small, if it can be conceived of, it can be said in English. I think we really have a great, useful language because we're not scared to borrow from all the other languages. We don't have an academy of English, you know. We have our own way of doing things that's just sort of carved out of history, you know. And people like to knock the English language and its inconsistencies in spelling and pronunciation and grammar, but I just kind of think that's all part of the fun of it. And the fact that being a native speaker of it your whole life doesn't mean that you'll understand all the peculiarities. You'll still get a lot of it wrong a lot of the time, you know. It is really something to me. Anyways, I think my attitude towards the English language, though, has recently changed. Within the last 2 years, I've become less of a militant Anglicist, and I've started to really look into how wonderful other languages can be and how unique they can be at expressing certain ideas, especially artistically and poetically. And people always give credit to the Romance languages like Italian and French and Spanish for having a special ability to capture certain poetic and romantic ideas. You know, romance, it's, you know, the romantic languages, it's in the name. But I was kind of against that, but then I started listening to music. You see, everything to me goes back to music. When I can hear it in musical form, then all of a sudden it's like, now I've got it, okay? So I can understand something in terms of song lyrics and how they can enhance and express ideas in a way that I can't see in poetry, even though lyrics are nothing more than poetry. Just poetry set to music, you know? I've been getting into French music lately, we'll just say that. And I am starting to think that the French language has a unique ability to express certain ideas in song, in poetry and in song. And it can say things that English just can't say. It has a... It's an excellent tool for accomplishing something. To me, English is like a Swiss Army knife. You know, it has something of everything. It's got a tool for every situation. They may not each individually be the best tools, but you can do anything with it. It's useful in any situation. It may be a little more difficult to try to use the knife in certain situations, and the corkscrew might not be as good as a dedicated corkscrew would be, but it can do anything. It's very utilitarian. The English language can do anything. But the French language is different. The French language is like a really good knife, like a really good chef's knife. that is useful for everything in the kitchen, that you can cut anything with and in any way you like, and you can sharpen it and hone it and use it in certain ways. But I mean, it's not going to be as good as that Swiss Army knife corkscrew at opening a bottle. I don't know, maybe it is if you know how to use it, but the point is, the French language is much more dedicated. It's a really good knife compared to English. And I don't speak French. I don't know the French language. And I'm going to be pronouncing a lot of French in this video. So, you know, the customary thing for YouTubers to do is to go, oh, I'm sorry, I did learn French, but I want to say French words. Well, I'm just going to say, look. I don't particularly care if I get the French wrong, which is why I didn't bother to learn French. So, joke's on you. Not just kidding. I do think a language should be pronounced properly when it's spoken. I just, I'm going to try my best, okay? But I don't speak French. The song I'm talking about today is Les Copains des Bourgs by Georges Bizet. And Georges Bizet was I guess a folk singer, a singer-songwriter in France in the 50s and 60s, and I think a little later. And he's fairly well known in France from what I can gather, but pretty much nobody's heard of him in the English-speaking world because he only sang and wrote in French. But his songs are pretty good. And he was kind of a anti-establishment, kind of beatnik type, pre-hippie, kind of thing in the late 50s, early 60s kind of era. So he was kind of a trailblazer, kind of like a Bob Dylan of France. And his writing is like on the level of Bob Dylan, but we'll get to that. This song, Copains des Bourgs, is, we'll talk about what that means here in a little bit, I believe. This is a song about a lot of themes, okay? And I'm going to analyze it as if it were a piece of classical literature or poetry. But it's about friendship, brotherhood, loyalty, faith, and, of course, the sea. It's a nautical song, okay? But what's brought into this is so many other things. I just can't wait to get to it. So first, we'll talk about the music. The song was released in 1964, and it's a very simple arrangement. I think it's just upright bass and acoustic guitar. There's like one rhythm guitar, and then there's a little bit another acoustic guitar that plays lead a couple of times throughout the song, and then there's Bizet's voice. So that's it. I mean, it's simple, it's stripped back, it's relaxing. If you don't know the French language and you hear it for the first time, which I had this wonderful experience of doing 2 years ago, without knowing what the words are, it's really just a nice, easygoing song to listen to. It's relaxing. I used to listen to it all the time to help me get to sleep at night. And it's just that kind of gentle, rocking kind of thing. And you could almost guess that it was about sea travel just from listening to it, which is really cool. And I suggest that if you want to have fresh ears and not know what the song's about before you listen to it, then you can go ahead and just listen to it now. Just look it up. The title will be in the name of the song is in the title, but otherwise, just let's just go on and just go through this stinking thing line by line. And look at this English translation here, which I got off of a website. I had to do research for this because a good bit of research actually, but I couldn't just look up the French lyrics and just jam it into Google Translate because it wouldn't have worked. Okay. I had to actually look at somebody who really put some effort in to try to really translate it. But so I'm gonna credit that source, of course, and it's in the description and probably in the comments too. Anyways, let's get started with the first verse. Non, ce n'était pas le radeau de la méduse à ce beau Dieu, quand c'est la dix forme de peu. Il naviguait en Perpénat sur le grand marin des canards et s'appelait les copains des bœufs. Our first verse in English, according to my translation, no, this wasn't the raft of the Medusa, this boat of ours. Let them tell each other that deep in the harbors and ports. So, in case you're not familiar with the raft of Medusa, it's sort of a nautical cannibal horror show, as I have written here. It's about an incident, a famous sea incident back in the Napoleonic era. July 2nd, 1816, there was a horrible shipwreck of the ship Medusa. 149 people survived the immediate shipwreck and crowded onto one giant raft that was just all that remained of the ship. They floated and drifted out at sea for 27 days. And by the time they were discovered, by the time they were rescued, there were only 15 left. So he went from 149 to 15, 10%. They were literally decimated. And it apparently the survival was just so terrible. It was like they had to resort to cannibalism and it was really rough. So we're talking the most desperate survival and harrowing situation in the history, that people can remember, It's a big deal. And there was a famous romantic painting of it by Theodore Géricault, I believe. And it was a big influence on the later romantic artists and everything. So we're talking dark imagery. So this song that sounds so nice and light and jaunty, we start with, no, it wasn't the raft of Medusa. Like that's pretty extreme, to say it wasn't this horrible, awful thing that was, it was almost a scandal for how crazy it was at the time. It's like saying, well, it's making a song about airplanes and saying, no, this wasn't 9/11. Starting with that, it's like pretty crazy, pretty. But that's a nice cultural reference that for the French people will get more often than English-speaking people. And also we see from the way he says, let them tell each other that deep in their harbors and ports. These people that he's talking about, these men, have a bit of a reputation with each other. And this is kind of trying to clear the air. He's going to give you the real story on who these guys were, the Copains de Boer. It sailed along, taking it easy on the big duck pond, and they called it friends first of all. So, the first thing I noticed when I was trying to look into how this was translated was, I noticed the line, sur le grand mare des canards, which I thought to translate literally, grand mare, like a grand mare, a large sea, des canards, of canards. What is a canard? A canard in English is a lie, but in French it's a duck. Which is a little bit interesting because apparently the English word canard, this is just a story, this might not be real etymology, that apparently in the Middle Ages, duck sellers used to sell a bag of ducks and claim that there were more ducks in the bag than there really were so they could make more money. So a canard being a lie comes from that, which is, I don't know if that's true. That's just a fun story. But what's interesting here is that he's saying they sailed along on the big duck pond. Now, I've been kind of racking my brain about what they mean by the big duck pond. I don't think they literally mean they're sailing on a big duck pond. I think they're talking about the ocean, but describing the ocean as a big duck pond, Grand Mare des Canards, or just a big sea of ducks, which is, I don't know, maybe the ducks are the other boats. I don't know, but that's interesting. It's just saying that it's kind of saying like it's a small world, like the ocean isn't as big and vast of a place as we might think. And they called it friends first of all. So, okay, so here we go into, this comes straight from the website. So, Copains de Boer means mates come first. Mates come first. Like as in shipmates or friends, But it sounds like Copains de Boer, not de Boer, but de Boer, which means just shipmates. Just mates of the board, mates of the ship, So mate and friend are treated the same here, of course, although mate has the nautical sense. So it's like saying, they called the ship, shipmates. They were just friends, but also friends first of all. So you can kind of translate it as mates come first if you put it all together, which is a little bit interesting to me. I think that's smart that we keep going back to this line. And just a note on the structure of this song, it's not like a verse, chorus type thing. It's verse, 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 verse. It's like a poem with multiple stanzas, but there is a bit of a refrain at the end of each verse where he just goes back to Copains de Boer. Most of the time, not in every verse, but in most of the verses. So I guess we'll go on to the second verse. C'est fluctuat nec mergitur, c'était pas de la littérature. Non déplaisant, jetait de ceux, on jetait de ceux. Son capitaine et ses matelots n'étaient pas des enfants salauds, mais des amis franco de peu, des copains de beurre. So the first half of this verse translates to, it's fluctuat nec mergitur. We're not exactly literature, begging the pardon of magicians and sorcerers, magicians and sorcerers. So, what is fluctuat nec mergitur, or fluctuat nec mergitur, as the French would pronounce it? It's the Latin motto of the city of Paris, the biggest city in France, and it's represented by a ship in full sail. So France is the ship in full sail, and it means, in English, beaten by the waves, but does not founder. So we're talking about perseverance here. We're talking about overcoming difficulty, which I think is cool. Enduring hardship, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. And so we're kind of so it's kind of cool that the city of Paris has a nautical, as a nautically themed motto, which is, Paris isn't even directly on the sea, but that's cool, and it's very useful to use this in this song. So when you say fluctuat nec mergitur in a song, only other French people are going to get that, which there's a lot of really French stuff in this song. And it's also interesting, the begging the pardon of magicians and sorcerers. So they're full speed ahead, beaten by the waves but does not founder attitude is so incredible that it even begs the pardon of magicians and sorcerers. Like, they don't even believe it. It's astounding. It's incredible, what they can accomplish. The captain and his crew were not sons of bitches, but mates, as good as you can get, best mates first of all. So that's cool. So that's pretty cool. The sons of bitches in French is enfants de cele, which literally translates to children of bastards. So they don't actually say sons of bitch; they say like child of bastard child. Children of bastards. So that's the French way of saying sons of bitch, which is kind of cool. And again, we're clearing the air, just saying. They weren't jerks, they weren't sons of bitches, they were just best friends. So, again, we're trying to clean up these guys' reputation. The friends, first of all. Third verse. C'était pas des amis de luxe, des petits casteurs pollux, des gens des sordes méga-morts. C'était pas des amis choisis, pas Montagnier la Boétie. Sur leur ventre, ils se tapaient feu aux copains des beurs. See, so English, we have, they weren't high-quality friends like Castor and Pollux, or the guys of Sodom and Gomorrah. So, let's go through that. Castor and Pollux were Roman gods of navigation, and were also known as inseparable friends. So, again, we have this friendship theme, and we're also referencing mythology and ancient characters, which is pretty cool. Sodom and Gomorrah, of course, were the cities that God smote for their sinful behavior, men laying with men. The term sodomy comes from the city of Sodom. So we have a mythological reference and a biblical reference, smack to smack, right against each other. And what's interesting is saying that they're not like the guys of Sodom and Gomorrah. The translation has a little note in there that says that Brassens was lightly accused of misogyny. I'm not exactly sure what the connection is there. The song is about brotherhood, okay? Women aren't allowed into this club. So maybe that's what it is. Then we have, they weren't friends chosen by Montaigne and La Boétie. but they were mates and got on well together, friends first of all. So Montaigne, La Montaigne, was a Renaissance philosopher who popularized the essay. So it's a pretty important figure in philosophy. The way he liked to the way his essays worked is he would tell a casual anecdote or story as like a story from his life, and he would pepper in intellectual insight. So that was his attitude. He's maybe a little more appreciated in the French-speaking world than in the English-speaking world, but he was a huge influence on pretty much every philosopher that came after him, from, I don't know, René Descartes to Karl Marx. They all love him. And then the other guy, La Boétie, or, Etienne de La Boétie, another philosopher. And he was a big proponent of anti-statism, civil disobedience. He's not as well known or influenced, but he is known best of all for being best friends with Montaigne. They were very close together. Just the best of friends. So immediately going to the most famous French example in history of greatest friends. You have Castor and Pollux, all the way up to Montaigne and Boétie. And you have Sodom and Gomorrah, which is a bit of a contrast. But Montaigne and Boétie there's speculation that they may have been gay together. They weren't just good friends, that they were butt buddies. But the Sodom and Gomorrah connection here in this song makes me wonder if this entire verse is just one big no homo. But I hate to reduce it to that. But there is a thought there. Also, you have when you say like they're best mates and they got on well together, that in the French, sur le ventrille il s'est tapé fort, literally means they hit each other hard on the stomach, which I guess is kind of like slap each other's back. You may hear that in English. So that's kind of an interesting way. Let's go on to the next verse. C'était pas des anges non plus, l'évangile il l'avait pas lu, mais il soumet toute voix de Dieu, Jean-Pierre et Paul et compagnie, c'était le sale et litanie, le credo le confité au Copains des bœufs. They weren't angels either. They hadn't managed to get round to reading the gospel. But in friendship, they sailed towards each other in full rigging. So this is interesting. Saying, they weren't like the guys of Sodom and Gomorrah, but hey, they weren't angels either. They weren't super highly moral. They were just sailors, okay? So we go back to, also we have a call back to the metaphor of the ship in full sail, the Fluctuatnik Mergitur. And here we see an interesting thing. In friendship, they sailed towards each other in full rigging. So now it's kind of like the men and the ship are the same. Okay, they're one with the ship. Their friendship is the ship, which is kind of an interesting way of phrasing that. It's a cool metaphor. They sailed towards each other in full rigging. And then we have John, Pierre, and Paul and the rest. And this was their only litany. Their credo and their confiteor, friends first of all. So, John, Peter, Paul, very common names. Jean, Pierre, and Paul. They're just everyday guys. They're regular guys, okay? And now we're bringing in back to the theme of religion. So we had the Old Testament biblical reference, but these are strong religious terms from Catholicism and other branches of Christianity. We have the litany, which is a form of prayer used in every service. It's the supplication, asking God for things. I know from church myself that there's a part of the service that you just sit there and you ask God for forgiveness and mercy. So saying that John, Peter, and Paul was their only litany, that all they needed was each other. They didn't need to ask for anything else. And then the credo and the confiteor, credo meaning I believe, confiteor meaning I confess. So those are other parts of the church service where you protest your faith, or protest your faith? I don't think that's the word. Where you announce your faith, profess your faith. That was the word I was looking for. Where you profess your faith, and you of course confess your sins. So their credo, their confiteor, their beliefs, their confessions. It was all they needed was each other. They lived for each other. It was all within themselves, you know. So we're talking about a tight group of guys here, you know. Au moindre coup de Trafalgar, c'est l'amitié qui punait le cœur, c'est elle qui lui montrait les nœuds, Oh, quand ils étaient en détresse, que Brassens lançait des SOS, on aurait délaissé mes feux, les copains des beurs. This next verse I like. So we have, at the slightest hint of Trafalgar, it was friendship which took them over the watch. That was what gave them their bearings. So, we have au moindre coup de Trafalgar. Now, the coup de Trafalgar is a French expression that just means a disaster in general. You know, you don't want a coup de Trafalgar, you know. We want to avoid that. But it's interesting to talk about where this comes from, which of course references the Battle of Trafalgar, which is, I have written here, was October 21st, 1805, during the War of the Third Coalition. France and Spain attempted to wrest control of the Channel from the British so that they could invade Britain, something that Napoleon never managed to achieve. And this coup de Trafalgar was just a stunning failure. It was a humiliating blow to the Spanish and the French fleet, which were larger in number. We're talking 10 times as many casualties in terms of people. People killed and people injured on the French and Spanish side than were killed or injured on the British side. The French and British together lost 22 ships. Britain didn't lose a single one. Britannia rules the waves. So I like that reference there. Like another wonderful nautical reference. It's a French expression, but the nautical history of it is a great way to bring that in. So at the slightest hint of Trafalgar, it was their friendship that gave them their bearings, which literally in French, he says something like helps them find north, which is, you know, like a compass, you know. They find their bearings. They can rely on each other and stick together through the toughest of times. And the second part of the verse, and when they were in distress and their arms signaled SOS, you would have said they were signaling friends first of all. Again, just the worst of times, they stick together. And we also have Fluctuat nec mergitur, the beaten by the waves but does not founder. They stick together. Even when they're signaling SOS, they're signaling friends first of all. Au rendez-vous des bons copains, y avait pas souvent de lupin. Quand l'un d'entre eux manquait que c'est qu'il était mort. Oui, mais jamais, son grand jamais, sont-ils dans l'encer fermé? Sont-ils après qu'aucun de ceux il manquait en cœur? Next we have, when the mates met up, it wasn't often that one of them was missing. If there was a gap, he must be dead. He must be dead. So, this is saying they're always there for each other. Only death can separate them. Interesting there, the souvent de le pain line means they weren't often rabbits. So they weren't hiding away. But, you know, translated it really means that if there was a gap, he must be dead, you know. Kind of like my old football coach when I was like 12 years old. He used to say, if you don't come to practice, you better bring a doctor's note or a death certificate. You know, that kind of thing. But never, absolutely never, did the hole in the water close over him. 100 years later, would you still believe it? They would miss him still. So no man is ever left behind. Even if he drowns in the ocean, they go back and get him. They don't leave him to the sea. They always rescue men overboard, and they never forget each other. 100 years later, they still come together to remember each other. It's their friendship is timeless. Des bateaux j'en ont pris beaucoup, mais le seul qui était nul et qui n'est jamais viré d'abord, mais viré de peu. There we go. Il naviguait en perpénard sur le grand marin des canards et s'appelait les copains des bœufs, les copains des bœufs. I boarded a lot of boats, but the only one which really stayed on course, which never got on the wrong track, sailed along, taking it easy, on the Big Duck Pond. They called it Friends First of all. So, in summary, this song is about friendship, but more than that, it's about fraternity, or to use the Germanic word, brotherhood. The sea is the means by which these men come together, but it also represents their trials and tribulations. The ship, the men, and their friendship are all the same. Together, they can overcome any challenge. And even though he's putting across such a nice, sweet, emotional, heavy message across the whole thing, he slips in these deep, poignant, and meaningful references to history, art, philosophy, literature, religion, mythology. I mean, I defy you to find an English language pop song with such depth. It just doesn't exist. I'd be impressed if it referenced any one of these things, or was even close to as deep as this song. I'm just bowled away by this song. The more I looked into it, the cooler I realized it was. Like, it's just an awesome freaking song. When, to me, before I looked it up, it was just a nice, relaxing thing that I could listen to help me get to sleep at night, you know? In the end, these guys are just normal guys. They're not particularly moral or righteous, and they're not particularly immoral or villainous. They're not high class, but, you know, they are friends. Friends first of all. Oh, I hope I got it somewhere in there. But I'm glad it's over, because it's hot in here. And I have to turn the AC back on.